Okay. No. Okay, good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. We've got some pretty interesting talks today, a bit more advanced, but we do have some big events coming up, so this is a pretty significant meeting. So, as usual, we're going to start off with our Ottawa guide. Come on. I told you it wouldn't work. So yes, we're going to start off with Ottawa Skies. Dave Chisholm did put this together as he usually does. He's just not here to present it, so I'll just be going through it with you. Then we have another installment of Imagers Corner with Andrew Brown. And then a quick talk on safe solar observing for the upcoming eclipse. After break, we have our main feature, which is George Livadaras, I think?
That's correct.
Good. Who's going to be talking about light pollution and sky glow evolution. So we're good. We're going to follow that by our usual observations, announcements, door prizes, blah, blah, blah. So new members this month, we have Jackie and Todd Bastianen, Brian and Robin Bennett, Abdesalam Boulia, Tara Marshall, and Brad Stewart. Give them a warm welcome. And so for members in the news, we've got our usual Gary Boyle. So he has confirmed that he will be back in studio on 580 CFRA, so 580 AM, I suppose, around 12:15 p.m. I didn't even write the date. Just try it every day. So he's going to be talking about the eclipse and our outreach event. So I'll get back to you on that. He's also confirmed today that he will be on CTV Morning Live on the 21st, the day of the eclipse, to talk about our outreach event and, of course, how the eclipse works. And that's going to be at 6:50 a.m. So, Ottawa skies. Full moon was on the 7th, I think. And today it is waning gibbish. Firstly, it's meteor shower. Best viewing dates are the night of August 12th to 13th after midnight. And Dave writes this, which I'm going to read out to you because it was perfectly written. The Perseus is one of the best meteor showers to observe, producing up to 60 meters per hour at its peak. It is produced by comet Swift-Tuttle, which was discovered in 1862. The Perseus are famous for producing a large number of bright meteors. The shower runs annually from July 17th to August 24th. It peaks this year on the night of August 12th and the morning of August 13th. So there is going to be a pretty big moon.
That's not the radiant Perseus. That's the great
I didn't make this, man.
That's not right. Perseus. Be Perseus and that's what you.
There you have it. So I suppose that's right. All that being said, there is going to be a pretty big moon this year, so it will be some pretty tough seeing, but apparently it's still worth it. It's pretty impressive every year. Of course, we can go without saying the partial solar eclipse, August 21st. In Ottawa, we get a max of 61.1% coverage. So that's going to be in early afternoon. You can't really miss it. And so he also wrote about the total solar eclipse, which is happening in 2024. And totality, well, Kingston, Ontario is in the path of totality, which is about 2-3 hours away. But I was told to warn you that April in Kingston is guaranteed cloudy. So, come on, man. Mercury not visible. Venus in the early morning. Mars was not visible. Jupiter early evening, so that's some good seeing. And Saturn all month. Uranus and Neptune all month as well. And no ISS this month. And so I'll leave you with this in honor of the curfew. All right, so without further ado, let's welcome Andrew Brown.
Good evening. So earlier in June, Eric Lemay and Paul Coniger began the Imagers Corner section with the intent to cover questions about astrophotography we received from other members. And sorry. And tonight my topic is on using Magic Lantern to expand the functionality of Canon DSLR cameras for the purpose of astrophotography. So what is Magic Lantern? It is a software modification designed with cinematography in mind. It is installed off the SD card and runs alongside the camera's native firmware. Normal camera functions are not affected by the presence of Magic Lantern, and all functions are still available, even if you were to put in a normal SD card without Magic Lantern installed. It doesn't affect the camera that way. As a quick disclaimer, however, all users accept liability for using this feature. But to the best of my knowledge, no users have encountered any problems with their cameras getting damaged by this. Most issues are resolved by simply removing the battery. There's a list of currently supported cameras. It is still in active development, so new cameras get added all the time. So, it is reasonable to say that DSLRs have already revolutionized astrophotography on the consumer level. But as capable as they are, it is my opinion that DSLRs are handicapped out of the box by the manufacturer. While the hardware is capable of many useful features, they are often omitted due to low demand, reserved for higher-end models, or simply not to overwhelm the user. Because of these limitations, astrophotographers have to turn to peripheral devices to fill the gap, such as a laptop or an intervalometer. Here's a short summary of the main features that Magic Lantern I found offers for astrophotography. The main ones of note are the bulb timer and intervalometer, which are critical. Mirror lockup is a feature that helps to reduce vibrations by flipping the mirror up with a delay before activating the shutter. Advanced bracketing is for doing HDR photography. Exposure to the right, movie shutter, FPS override, ISOs, and raw video is very interesting. I'll go into this more in detail later on. So that's for general capturing, but Magic Lantern also offers some very interesting features that enhance your live view functions as well. So making images brighter, more easier to focus and target your objects with. I'll go into more detail with that. The only one I don't want to cover later is Magic Zoom. It's essentially a picture-in-picture zoom box with some of the Magic Lantern features applied to it. Now, the intervalometer and the bulb timer are your main features for imaging subframes for stacking. These functions are so integral to astrophotography that both Eric and Paul emphasize purchasing one as a peripheral device. But Magic Lantern offers this function built into the camera. Advanced bracketing can be used for the upcoming solar eclipse to capture images like this high dynamic range eclipse. And ETTR, which stands for exposure to the right, works to expose images with a histogram to the right of the frame without clipping highlights. Used in conjunction with the intervalometer, it can be used to take more advanced time-lapse photography, such as day to night transitions, which I'll demonstrate towards the end of the presentation. These are the menu options for the intervalometer and the bulb timer. The settings are fairly intuitive here. You simply have to set your desired time exposure by minutes, seconds, up to hours. And in the intervalometer, you set your interval, number of shots you want, and the starting conditions. This would ordinarily require a secondary external peripheral device. Raw video recording is a useful feature for planetary imagery. The raw data is uncompressed to preserve every detail at a high 14-bit depth. Especially good combined with cameras that have a proper video crop mode like the T3i, where the image is scaled to represent perfect one-to-one pixel representation without bidding down the frame. Now the capture performance takes a bit of a hit because the data bit rate is so high. So the performance mostly depends on the camera's write buffer and write controller, less so on the actual SD card. It's usually not the limiting factor. But it is permissible to drop frames in order to capture a higher resolution. These are some examples that I've taken in this matter of Mars and Jupiter. That little halo there is actually clouds. I thought it was pretty cool. Now, the advanced bracketing I want to emphasize a little bit because of the upcoming eclipse, which during the total phase of the eclipse, no single exposure will be capable of capturing everything we saw in the earlier slide. To image an extended corona and Earth glow without overexposing the chromosphere and prominences, bracketing is necessary. Bracketing is to take a sequence of images from fast through to low shutters and later to process them into a high dynamic range composited image. HDR images more closely represent what the human eye can see, and the more brackets taken, the clearer and more detailed the image will be. Magic Lantern makes this very easy to bracket up to 12 frames in such a way with a range of EV increments. The manual exposure setting of the camera is what determines the longest shutter, but this is also compatible with the bulb timer and the intervalometer to trigger multiple batches of bracketed shots at one go. Now, back in June, Paul discussed the use of DSLR live view to focus with. But anyone who has attempted this understands it is still a time-consuming process that often requires multiple test images. This is one area Magic Lantern really sets itself apart. Normally, the live view has a frame rate of just 1/30th of a second. With the FPS override function, frame rates of below 1 frame per second are available. This means the view consists of frames that have gathered much more light and therefore show much dimmer features. In principle, 1 FPS equals 1 second of exposure. And going from 1/30th of a second, that's already 30 times more light gathered over the standard live view. Magic Lantern can go as low as 0.2 frames per second, or 5 seconds of exposure. That's 150 times more light in your field of view of the live view. Now, oh, that didn't scale well. So this chart is basically meant to represent your typical framing and focus routine using the standard methods, where you would take an image, you would review it, move your scope, change your focus, take another image, review it again, and repeat until you're satisfied. But with FPS override, and also others I'll get into, the exposure override and live view gain, it's possible for the camera to basically see in the darkness, where you can do all of that, framing, targeting, and focusing, without having to change modes and review and actually take pictures. So it simplifies the entire process where you just see what you want to do and make your adjustments. Here is an example of a wide field with some of these features applied, where you can see the silhouette of the trees against the cloud sky, and focus on in that manner. Yeah, so I'll also get into the crop marks and the ghost images soon. Okay. So here is an example of focusing on Polaris. A magnitude 4 is typical of a star one might choose to focus on. But as can be seen on the left, it does not ordinarily show up well in live view, and will require taking test images. On the right is with frames per second override enabled. The pattern becomes clearer as dim features become more easily picked up. To further enhance the view, enabling exposure override produces the example on the right. With such a prominent pattern, focusing becomes much easier and accurate, and further dimmer stars become may be used effectively. Used this way, it is also possible to see deep sky objects while framing your target. Unfortunately, I do not have a screenshot of this, but through my 8-inch optics, I could clearly see a full color view of the Orion Nebula, as well as Andromeda, and discern its prominent dust lanes in live view without taking an image. Lastly, live view gain is also available to amplify the signal. An EV level is one stop, so every EV level you go up doubles the exposure or brightness. This can go all the way up to 7, which becomes excessively noisy, but it can reveal some very, very dim features of the frame. There's also a complementary feature called ISO override, which applies to video mode. The difference there, while it performs similar to the live view gain, it will actually record that adjustment. So together with the FPS override, exposure, and ISO overrides, it enables the camera to see practically in the dark. Okay. So here is an example of ghost images. A ghost image is useful for reframing shots for image sessions that extend over multiple nights. Simply keep an older frame on hand, perhaps protected in its own folder, and use Magic Lantern to apply it as a live view overlay. With this technique, simply realign the stars and continue imaging. So this is an image of Polaris that I took previously, and this is what the camera sees in real time. The ones here with the diffraction pattern is this image superimposed upon that. And you can see other complementary stars as well. All I would have to do is take my hand controller and drive it up, down, left, right until they line up. And now when I take a subsequent set of images, I know that they'll all stack properly. And this is a simulated view that also shows what a little bit of field rotation would do. Crop marks are masks that can be applied over the live view. These are examples of custom crop marks that I produced in Photoshop following instructions and a color palette provided by Magic Lantern. They are useful for centering stars and measuring error in your mount setup, such as cone error, polar drift alignment, and periodic error. And essentially here, everything that appears in black is transparent. So, for instance, if there were a star here, I could position it directly in the center of the reticule. Or if I was measuring cone error, I might center the star, do a meridian flip, and see the star moves. I know that a certain amount due to cone error, and correct it halfway using the increments. It's just, it's very useful. Now, the main menu of Magic Lantern is accessed by the delete key, which is normally not in use. And here are some of the primary menus available. Shoot, movie, exposures, overlay. There are others that I don't get into. But here you'll find intervalometer, bulb timers, frames per second override, raw video recording, etc. Now, if it all seems a little bit overwhelming, that's because it is. But the Magic Lantern offers ways of simplifying the menu system for you. You may create a list of your 10 favorite most used options, so you can have access to them in one location. Magic Lantern also produces an automated list of modified settings, and essentially anything that has been changed from the default will show up here. Furthermore, Magic Lantern uses a module system where you can add and remove certain features. For example, the ETTR and raw recording and advanced interpolometer and things like that have to be enabled through this menu. And the last panel here is an advanced menu mode with everything combined into one single area. There is quite a bit of depth here, and most of it is not relevant to this talk. Okay. So this is a time-lapse demonstration of a flicker-free day-to-night transition with the intervalometer, exposure to the right, and a deflickering module that creates sidecar files, processed with an additional Adobe Bridge script for image ramping and deflickering. The key thing to note here is the smooth and even brightness as the lighting changes without distracting flicker. ETTR is responsible for adjusting the exposure as necessary, as can be seen with the sharp vehicles becoming more blurred later on. This would ordinarily require expensive light metering controller to accomplish. And it's actually one of the hardest things you can do in time-lapse photography. But Magic Lantern makes it relatively simple.
Where is this?
It's off my balcony. Parliament Hill down here in Kirkman, down this way.
Yeah, I recognize the corner.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and with that concludes my talk. Now, do we have time for any questions? Did anybody have any questions answered?
Yeah, a couple.
Okay.
Is this open source cross-platform, or is it specific to support?
It's specific to Canon, and it is open source as well.
Okay, I was referring to your PC software.
Right. This is software that runs internally to the camera. Can we turn that spot off maybe? I like to see the audience. So Magic Lantern runs off the SD card. It's software that boots from the card when you start the camera. Yeah. So there's very little that's actually done to the camera's firmware. The only thing that is required is to flash it that changes a flag, which enables a setting to tell it that it's okay to boot software from the SD card. All of Magic Lantern is stored and run off of the SD card, alongside the camera's native firmware. If you were to swap out the memory card and put one in that didn't have Magic Lantern, the camera would still boot. You simply wouldn't have access to Magic Lantern features.
What was this software originally developed for? If it wasn't for astronomy, which you intimated it isn't, what was the original impetus behind its development? Because it's obviously quite complex.
Yes, it was originally intended for use with cinematography. People wanted to use their DSLR cameras to shoot video because they have a wide range of lenses available and good sensors, but the basic movie modes were not that useful. So buried in amongst many of those other settings are things for doing focus ramping and honestly I can't remember. This is far too much to go into. It might be recommended if you've already mastered the use of a DSLR to look into it further, but for just doing astrophotography, it's pretty easy to get into. And it does help to simplify the setup because it is not required to purchase and attach and manage other peripheral devices like an intervalometer or a laptop. I'm not saying that laptops don't have uses, they do, but it's not necessary. Anything else? It's free. Yeah, open source. So if you're looking at buying an intervalometer, you could be $40 for a simple one or over $100 for more advanced ones, especially any that have light metering, which could be needed for time-lapse that they demonstrated. There is something like it for Nikon, but it's different group entirely. It's not this one. I only know about Canon.
The images are going to be stored on the software, correct?
Yeah, the images are still stored on the SD card as normal.
So if you went into the Canon menu, let's say, putting out the card, you're going to boost the software, or that's still there?
So when you install Magic Lantern and you go to reformat the card, there is an option to preserve the Magic Lantern files when you do that. Okay, thank you very much. One more thing. I will be here during the break with my camera if you'd like to take a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. So for those of you who are interested in viewing the eclipse coming up, this next talk has some really, really important information. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Cole.
Hey guys. Ladies and gentlemen. So folks, this of course will all be moot because it'll be completely socked in and cloudy for the entire event until probably about 9 minutes to 4 in the afternoon, at which point it will magically clear up and become wonderful for the rest of the day. I'm trying to put reverse spin on this, you know. Anyway, so now this is something I no doubt most of us here are familiar with, how to observe the sun properly. But there are people who are going to be seeing this, and there are people that you're going to run into that you'll want to explain a little bit of it to. So I'm hoping to give a little more background. This old classic photograph just shows a whole bunch of people using a whole bunch of different techniques, projection and glasses and the filters, and somebody with a very expensive hydrogen alpha filter set up there. Ooh, heavens to Mercatory. Okay, now we have the obligatory eye picture, which I stole from someplace and never could figure out exactly where. Anyway, the real problem that you've got with sunlight is that it's a little much for your eyes. So I wanted to split it into the 3 basic classes that you've got. When I've been talking to people about this, I find that there's often a bit of confusion over what causes what problems. A lot of people in particular consider ultraviolet to be the boogeyman for observing solar observing. Ultraviolet is actually not the big boogeyman. The biggest thing you've got with ultraviolet is more long-term effects. So you're going to too much ultraviolet light accumulated over a long, long time. You're going to start seeing things like cataracts and cataracts both in the lens and in the cornea. The only thing that you're likely to get for short term are things like snow blindness, which is basically a sunburned cornea. If you've ever had snow blindness, I've had a mild case, it's really miserable. It feels like somebody poured large quantities of warm sand into your eyes and then ground them a little bit and then dripped in a little lemon juice just for fun. And then it gets bad. But fortunately it heals in a couple of days. So ultraviolet really isn't that big a problem unless you're in things like really, really high elevation. For the most part, it can't get through the the cornea and the lens. There is one mild exception, and that is people who've had lenses surgically removed, the lenses in their eyes surgically removed. In that case, it is theoretically possible to get some damage to your retina with ultraviolet light, but it does take a fair bit. You've got to get into some things like sun gazing to really start getting a lot of damage like that. Visible, we start getting into a bit more damage that can actually persist. Flash blindness, at its very lowest level, can just be we deplete the photochemicals that produce our vision, and you can't see for a little while. But if it's particularly bright flash blindness, like really high intensity stuff, like the high intensity strobe lights that they use for tactical use for things like raids and such like, that can actually cause photochemical changes inside your retina, where it literally breaks the photochemicals apart, and you've got free radicals running around that can start damaging your retina. Again, for sun gazing, actually, believe it or not, that is a thing, sun gazing. I couldn't believe it when I stumbled into it either, but there's actually some groups that claim that it does wonderful things for your something or other. frankly, sounds about as crazy as, I don't know, sitting on anthills with your underwear off, but, what was that? No, okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, okay, we won't go there. So, again, visible light, naked eye for the eclipse, particularly for us here where we're getting a partial, you're not likely to see a major problem. You really have to put an effort into looking at the sun for a protracted period of time. It can be done, but you do have to work at it. Infrared, this is the one that really does the damage if you've got prolonged exposure. This stuff does get through the cornea, it does get through the lens, and when it hits the retina, it literally warms the retina up. And once that retinal temperature goes up by about 10 degrees, you start cooking it, literally. I've seen a picture of it which looks disgustingly like a McDonald's hamburger. Oops, sorry, no brand reference there. A hamburger. So it's something you really do want to avoid. Again, for naked eye, the real problem that you've got is for those moments just before totality and just after totality. The problem with that is the visible light is what triggers our aversion reflex, where we just have to blink or turn our eyes away. It's the same thing that happens to you when you're driving home into the sunset, and you've got to see the traffic lights, and you're trying to stare past the sun. So that reflex doesn't work when you're very near totality. There isn't enough light to trigger it, but there could be enough infrared to start damaging your eyes. The worst of it is you won't feel anything, there's no pain receptors, and it can take hours before you'll notice it. So basically, by the time you notice it, it's really too late. The biggest problem, of course, is if you're using telescopes and binoculars, or even cameras with optical filters, though optical viewfinders, though those are really getting rarer nowadays. No, there we go. Yeah, so sun of the naked eye, don't panic. I gotta get one of these towels. There's actually a site that has a whole pile of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy stuff. It's marvelous stuff, too expensive, but anyway. So don't panic. There's all the standbys. Oh, stop that, behave. Thank you. Number 14 welder's glass. Last I checked, you can still get that in town. And then the commercial viewers, like the ones that we've picked up. Oh, I see Chris, you did a change here. I put in the one that was bound in Sky News magazine, which you've already seen, and then we've got the ones that we're handing out. So these are all perfectly good ways to observe the sun. They give you a very good view in terms of what we can see for a typical eclipse. For those of you who are going for totality, down in the band of totality, these won't allow you to see the corona, but they're very nice things for just seeing.
I have a question.
Yeah, fire away.
For welder's glass,
Yes.
is that just for visual viewing, or can you put it with binoculars or something like that?
You can put it before, like on the sun side of the objective lens of your binoculars.
In front of the lens.
Or you can use it as an objective filter if you can get a piece big enough. Your problem will be getting a piece big enough. If you can get it big enough to put it in front of your lenses, Bob's your uncle. But you're probably better off with something like Otter film, where you can actually rig a mount. Yeah, you can, just don't put it behind. Don't put it on the eyepiece side.
Yeah. The optical quality tends to not be very good.
Yes, I was about to point that out.
7 or 8 power binoculars
Yeah.
are probably okay.
Yeah.
The telescope is going to be pretty.
Oh, yeah. For a telescope, it would be terrible. And I've actually noticed some of the welder's glass you can get. It's even lousy naked eye. Some of it's pretty wavy, just naked eye. But yeah, this is a good point. The optical quality of welder's glass is just not that good. It's not made for it. The big advantage of it is it's cheap, and it's very easy to get. And if you like welding, it's kind of handy. Now it turns out you can actually go down to number 12 welder's glass and still be optically safe, but it's incredibly uncomfortable. It's just way, way too bright. Nice little projector. Now, for those viewing for the total eclipse, there have been a lot of questions that I've seen on this in the last few weeks. Can you observe the total eclipse, the total phase, safely? Naked eye, it is safe, but the trick is, at the instant you see the diamond ring effect, or Bailey's beads, or a little sliver, that's when it's time to get those eclipse glasses back on, because the same problem that you've got, there could be too much infrared light coming in. It could start damaging your eyes. And the damage is cumulative, so if you've already accumulated some damage in the past, well, it's not a good thing. If you're using a telescope unfiltered, yeah, you can do it, but only during 100% totality. And you've got to be incredibly cautious to make certain that you're not going towards the ends where you've got a little less than 100% totality. For an unfiltered telescope at this stage, over here, it's downright dangerous. Naked eye, it's risky, but for a telescope, you're flirting with total, with serious eye damage. So the takeaway lesson for this is if you're not absolutely prepared for what to do, you've got accurate times, accurate timetables, you're giving yourself lots of safety factor on either edge, give it a try, but you should be aware that you are taking a risk, and you'll have to decide for yourself whether you think it's worth that risk or not. So my basic suggestion on that is if you're not absolutely sure, just don't do it. Rig a camera, wait for somebody else to take a picture. Yeah, I know it's cool, but if you're not certain, just I think it's best to say, drat, I didn't get it, than to have to see an ophthalmologist and discover there's very little to be done for you. Now, pinhole viewing, that's probably the safest way that I can think of, the safest and cheapest. However, I run into people who think that you look through the pinhole. This is a very common thing for people on the street. Oh, a pinhole camera, I'll look through the pinhole. A lot of people believe that. This kind of shows the technique. The trick for the pinhole is you stand with your back to the sun and take your little piece of card with the pinhole in it and aim it at the sidewalk, aim it at the wall, aim it at a piece of cardboard or what have you. And if you really like the I lost my contact lenses and my eyes are all gritty effect, you can use a colander. Personally, this reminds me of university days. No, won't say anything more about that. But I don't see the attraction, but it's kind of fun. So if you want to give it a shot, go for it. What you're seeing here is a whole bunch. Look at this. You can sit there and say, yeah, man, I've seen 127 eclipses in my lifetime. It was all copies of the same one, but that's how many. Never mind. Be quiet, Tim. So this can be fun, and I gather we're going to be doing that here. Aiming your telescope? Well, what do you mean aiming my telescope? I can see the sun. Yeah, but try aiming your telescope to it. I will point this out again. I'm sure most people in here, because most of us have done this before, have an idea of how to do it. Again, we're likely to be running into people who are doing this for the first time, and there's always a tendency to tear along the telescope tube because you can't see anything with the filter on. And the trick is the minimum shadow method. If we're aimed precisely at the sun, then we're going to have, in principle, a circular shadow. It's never going to be quite right because the angles are never right, but you're going to see the smallest possible shadow. So this is way off target, this is nicely on target. I've taught this technique to demonstrators at the Science and Tech Museum, and it's really easy to pick up. It does take a little bit of practice, but it's really easy. And this is a good thing to suggest to people who are just trying this out for the first time. I mean, you can buy all kinds of things like solar finders, but this is a nice simple method that will get you pretty close enough that you're going to get the glare in your eyepiece and you'll be able to line it up. So this is a nice trick for showing people, as a friendly sort of, this is how you get going and this is how you do it safely. Because part of what we're trying to do is encourage people to do this safely and have some fun later with regular solar observing. I wanted to get into the two major grades of photographic filters. You'll notice over here I have a photo film And here are the regular film. Many of these come with a little blue visual tag. These sometimes come with a red photographic tag. I just put up those little formulas for optical density and transmissivity because you'll see these listed here. That is logged to the base 10, by the way. Oh, stop that. Behave. Nice projector. Okay. So photographic, the idea here is that you can stop down your cameras or use a faster shutter time. Might be handy for lucky imaging. A little extra speed never hurts. But this is too much for visual safety. Just short of 0.02% is really not safe for your eyes. The visual, the recommendation from the, I forget the name, the International Standards Association, I think it is, organization. Yeah, International Standards Organization, is visual density 5 for a solar filter. Nice part with the optical densities is you can just add them up and subtract them because it's a logarithm. And what this shows you here is that you can make up the difference between the two of them just with plain neutral density filters. And because we've rejected most of the energy, we can use the neutral density filters in the eyepiece stack because these are, the amount of energy is small enough, they're not going to be cracked. This will just reduce it to make it safe for your eyes. If you do the math on this, oh, stop that, behave. If you do the math on this, you'll discover that a pair of typical moon filters will give you enough to make a difference. A 13% moon filter and a 50% moon filter stacked will make the difference between the photographic and the visual. I've noticed a lot of vendors are not selling the photographic this year. Apparently they're saying they don't have the demand and they don't want the confusion. Because if you just buy the sheets, you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference just by looking at it. You would have to actually make the measurements. So I guess they're playing it safe. This is something that you'll find a number of people are getting back to is the old Herschel wedge. The idea is we take our incoming light, run it through a wedge. And these numbers, from the research I've done, these are pretty typical. Apparently even the original Herschel wedge back in Herschel's day was about 95%. So this leaves us with way too much light. 4.6% optical density, and it's way, 4.6% transmissivity, it's way too much light. So you must have extra filtration if you're going to use your eyeballs. It turns out that we can get the visual filtration almost for free because the light that comes off the wedge is polarized. It's just the nature of the wedge. It will be completely polarized at that angle. And so we can run this through a polarizing filter to drop a tremendous amount of the light. And as a bonus, you can rotate that filter to tune your brightness. So this is a really handy thing. So some of the stuff that's on the market now, they've got the polarizing filter built in and an additional neutral density filter on top. So you can just fine-tune the brightness and use it for imaging as well. The classic problem with the Herschel wedges has always been, what do you do with the waste light? The classic Herschel wedge just basically reflects it down to the ground, and if you happen to have something in the way, you can burn yourself pretty nastily. The latest generations that I've run into have little ceramic diffusers on the back of them, which gives you a sun spotter, I guess. It's a nice little added bonus. But these things actually run quite cool, and you don't have the problem with the waste light. I notice now we have 3 major vendors available, Bader Planetarium, Altair Astro, and Lunt Astro Systems for Herschel wedges. One of the nice things for these is they give you a really crisp view. Much crisper than any of the transmission filters that I've run into. So there's one minor little problem with them. They ain't cheap, but if you've got somebody around that you can borrow one from, it can be a good option. And apparently these things are very nice for imaging. That is, yeah, good point. Heat with the optical tube assembly, that is a problem. I noticed with the vendors here, they're recommending no bigger than a 6-inch refracting telescope. No more than 6 inches, and preferably 4 is what, I think it's Altair that recommends a 4, but you can go to a 6. All of them recommend not using it with reflectors. And I think their concern is they're afraid of damaging the bonding on the mirrors, or taking off the coatings, or melting whatever glue might be holding it to the cell, or what have you. I don't know whether that's truly a problem or not, or if they're just playing it safe. I really don't know.
And no SCT, you burn the baffle.
Yeah, you'll burn the baffle. You would burn the baffle quite nicely, wouldn't you? No SCTs was the comment. Yeah, so in general, I would personally, being a wimp, I'd just stick to a refractor myself. Even then, I guess there's possibly a risk of melting optical glue or some such thing like that. But hey, come on, man, what's a little risk? Never mind. Come on. Okay. Now, sun funnels, these are great fun. I brought one with me here if you wanted to take a peek at them. The sun funnel plans have resurfaced. They're now available on Astronomy Magazine and on the NASA 2017 Eclipse site. They're ridiculously simple to make. It's a funnel. And the material here on the top of it is rear projection screen material. Now, I made a bunch of these for the Science and Tech Museum a few years ago and made a couple for myself. I bought a minimum quantity of this cloth. So I happen to have a fair chunk of this cloth sitting over there behind the curtains over yonder. So if any of you want to get a little bit of this stuff to try out your own sun funnel, go for it. This one shows a hose clamp at the end of the funnel. I personally didn't like that because I found the hose clamp tended to come off. So I did what any self-respecting engineer does: duct tape. And I even got the gray stuff to match the funnel. The eyepiece down here should be one that you're willing to sacrifice because this does get rather hot. So if you've got a really nice eyepiece with lots of optical glue in here, well, I mean, maybe it would be okay, but I mean, oh no, my $150 eyepiece is now toast. Whereas my $20 cheapy eyepiece, oh well. I can always make small cookies with it. Something like that. So yeah, I mean, get a sacrificial eyepiece just in case. That might be something you can use for some of the the old Kellner like the cheapy eyepieces that they often provide with telescopes. Maybe that would be something to use them for this. The optical quality on this, I've noticed, isn't great, but for eclipse phases, it's perfectly fine. And what's fun about this is you can get a whole bunch of people around. So you can get a whole bunch of kids around, a whole bunch of people around. So these are really nice for group viewing. It's nice and simple and straightforward. Oh, what did I do, Chris? Okay. So, ow! Stop! So, okay, we are doing our partial solar observing here at the Aviation Museum. Observing, yes. Partial solar observing. Well, this is for people who want to observe the solar observers.
Yes.
Never mind, I'm not going to try and justify it. Chris gave me this slide, it's all his fault. Yeah, good, he even admitted it, perfect. So here's basically the schedule. Start at about 20 after 1. Mid-eclipse about 2:35. Interestingly enough, you're listing 61.1. The NASA Mr. Eclipse predictions for this area are 67%. And then there's another outfit that claims 68%. So I think what we can pretty much guarantee is it ain't total. But it should be fun anyway. And the end at about 10 to 4. So there's a fairly good long time that we can have a fair bit of fun to show the progress to people. Free RASC solar viewers, I honestly cannot remember how many we got, but it's a pretty good stack.
We got 1,000 of them.
We got 1,000? Okay, good. Boy, it is going to rain. Maybe I'm not even going to bother coming. Yeah. Now, I did check. The NASA Solar Eclipse site is streaming the eclipse from, I think it's 15 locations, and from balloons, from hot air balloons, I believe it is. So I'm thinking we should probably show that here. So I thought I'd bring a laptop and just stream it, or we'll see if they can run it in here. So even if it's cloudy, you can sit there and say, that's what I've got to see. Or, yeah, anyway, what can I say? Or it might be nice to put it in conjunction with seeing the partial eclipse we've got here, just to show people what they're not seeing. But seriously, all silliness aside, I mean, it's a nice thing to be able to see, you know, what's possible with an eclipse. It's better than, as my father would have put it, better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. He was a weird dude. That's where I got it. And then finally, we have our standard solar observing signs that we put up for our solar observing events. And our standard line is, don't do this unless you know exactly what you're doing, which I think is the simplest and safest way to put it. As most of you will know, it's not very hard, and the equipment isn't terribly expensive anymore. So there's really no excuse for using silly stuff like trying to look through CDs or chip bags. I've seen people actually use that, potato chip bags. And I mean, don't laugh. I mean, I've seen people do it. I saw somebody out putting a Pop-Tart bag over the front of his telescope. And, you know, look, oh, looks just the same as what these are using. No. No. So, I mean, please don't do it. It's just not worth it. The problem with those things is they might be okay. You just never know. They might be, but you can't guarantee it. So that's my quick rundown on what to do and what not to do for the solar eclipse and for sun gazing in general, the real sun gazing through telescopes and such in general. Do be safe, do learn how to do it, do learn how to do it. If you're not sure, find somebody who does do it. And do have fun with it, because you really can have a lot of fun observing the sun. It's something I quite enjoy. As I mentioned, I've got some rear projection cloth over there, just looking to get out of my house, so I can tell my wife there's one less piece of stuff hanging around in my house. And if anybody's got any questions, grumbles, or whatever, bring them on and I'll ignore them. All right.
I have a small number of the viewers here if people want some.
Oh, good. Chris has just told me, you probably heard this, but I'll repeat it anyway. There's a small number of Eclipse viewers here if you want them, if you want to pick them up today.
Tim, on a filtered telescope, any thoughts on filtered white light versus filtered H-alpha light for observing the eclipse?
Any thoughts on hydrogen alpha versus white light? Hydrogen alpha should be fun, but I'm not sure you're going to get much.
No, we don't. Well,
I mean, you also have the fun that we're not likely to have a lot of sunspots right at the moment, so at least you can probably catch a little extra viewing with prominences or whatever you had. Something I did notice for the transit of Venus was the hydrogen alpha crowd got first contact about 30 seconds to a minute before the white light crowd. So this should be fun this time around to see whether we get first contact with the hydrogen alpha a little bit before the white light. I'm planning on bringing two, both hydrogen alpha and white light. So it'll be fun to see if there's a difference. I think it'll just be fun, but you never know for sure. If you've got a really good hydrogen alpha scope, then yeah, you're going to get all the sunspot stuff as well. For the lower end hydrogen alpha stuff, like the PSTs, I find those aren't as good for things like sunspots. But you know, there's still a lot of fun. So you can use either one, I would think. And we'll have a couple of them here. So if the cloud gods cooperate with us, maybe you can see it.
Are you likely to see any of the texture of the rim of the moon, mountains and craters?
Are you likely to see texture? You know, I don't know. The last time I saw a partial, a few years back, I didn't notice anything, but it may well be that I just wasn't looking.
I think it's only every time the moment it's uneven.
Yeah, I would think it would be that. All I can say is I don't know. Let's find out. Sacrifice chickens, folks. We want to know. Yeah. Is it possible to have a pinprick in the RASC viewer that you might not be able to see but not damage the eye? I did some checking on that, and pinpricks in the viewers less than about 1/2 millimeter actually are not a problem. So if you can't notice a pinprick in there, you're not going to have a problem. The final word that I got on that one was a total of 5 millimeters diameter for, I can't remember the exact number, I'm sorry. But basically, if you can see a hole, toss the sucker. But if you can't notice it, I wouldn't worry about it. Less than about 1/2 millimeter it does not emit enough light to cause problems. And that was Ralph Chu's recommendation. If you don't recognize the name, Ralph Chu is one of the specialists in solar eye safety, world recognized expert in world eye safety, and he's written a number of articles on this, and I just boned up on those before I came. So small pinholes under 1/2 millimeter, not to worry. But yes, always check your equipment to make sure that it's in good shape. Always a good point. Anybody else? All right, folks. Thanks for listening. And let's hope for an eclipse. Let's hope for no clouds.
So I'd like to talk very quickly. Have you guys heard about the NASA Globe Observer program? Okay. So the NASA Globe Observer program works through an app on your smartphone and allows you to become a citizen scientist. So what you do is you can collect information for NASA from around the globe in some cases, and it's to study atmospheric environmental changes linked to outer space. And so they do have a big program coming up with the eclipse. So if you are going to be in North America that day, but specifically in the path of totality, they want you to sign up on their app. They tell you exactly how to do it. Arm yourself with a thermometer, and they want you to calculate the differences between the temperatures with sunlight and without, and how that affects the environment around you. So I thought it would be really interesting if you guys want to get in on that, to get some RASC members into the NASA database. So if you're interested, it's out there, it's free, NASA Globe Observer. So I believe, Rick, you had a few words to say?
Yeah. Yeah, also related to the eclipse, many of you will remember Sanjeev Suvarnarasa was a member of the center back some years ago. Used to be our premier astrophotographer. He went off. He was actually a lawyer with the Canadian government, and decided he liked doing his astrophotography art as an art. And so he left the group actually and opened a gallery in Almont. And just a week or so ago, my wife and I stopped in to see him and say hello. And they've actually got a display on right now called Eclipse. Now, most of the art, I mean, there's a bunch of his astro imaging stuff, which is all very spectacular, and then a bunch of very eclectic art on sort of the theme or the feeling or something of Eclipse. And I was actually quite astonished. I'm not a big fan of modern art, but I found this was a really, really nice collection. There's a lot of really good works. And it's a great day trip out to Almont. So I highly recommend going out to see the show. It's, I think, till the end of August.
What's the name of the gallery?
It's called Suvarnarasa Gallery.
Ah, okay.
It's on Main Street in Almont. Or Mill Street, sorry. Mill Street, which is the main shopping street through town. You can't miss it. It's the only gallery on the street. And he's a great guy. He's very interesting to talk to. He actually published a book on the way the scientists are stealing art. A lot of the Hubble images, all the stuff that we're seeing out of NASA, for instance, none of it is science. It's all art, and being essentially presented as marketing. So it's kind of an interesting read. The other thing he's doing is on the 21st, he has an arrangement with the town of Almonte. They're actually going to have a public viewing in the park. So I'm going to check with whoever's handling the outreach for our group, and maybe instead of doing it here, you want to go out to Almonte and help Sanjeev out. That's where we have our observatory. We should be making ourselves better known in the town of Almonte. So, thanks.
What's the title of the book?
Vanishing Stars.
Vanishing?
Vanishing Stars.
Stars.
Okay, so we're going to go on to our break. We're going to take a pretty short 10-minute break, maybe till 8:45. Membership benefits, we'll have more on that later. I guess I'll be giving out door prize tickets, but I don't have that many. So if we can find more, otherwise it's first come, first serve. We have like 4 door prizes anyway. So. Yeah? Okay. Okay, so for our next talk, we have a guest speaker from Montreal. And I'd just like to say we're always looking for people here to be on a light pollution committee, to be a light pollution coordinator. And it's not something we talk about very often, and it's kind of disregarded, so please just let this talk inspire you. And if ever you want to get involved, just come up to us. This is some really important stuff, and we don't talk about it enough. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome George Livadaras.
Hi. Boy, can't see nobody.
We're over to you.
Yeah, it's better to think that. Okay, so my name is George Livadaras. I work as a photographer in Montreal for many years, close to 30 years, I think. But I've been an amateur astronomer for about 40 years. I do astrophotography. And one of the problems with living in Montreal is a lot of light pollution. Huge amount of light pollution, much more than Toronto, much more than New York City. And because of that, I had to find a way to cope. So this is from my backyard, actually on my rooftop, looking towards city center during an overcast. This is overcast. And many years ago, back in the undergraduate years, I used to be able to peer through a handheld spectroscope and marvel at the spectrum of mercury lighting, sodium lights, and I was always wondering if I could actually capture the image. So essentially, what I did is I modified a spectroscope, a handheld spectroscope. And the box that you see right there is basically an empty box. It has a slit on one end, top end, and a diffraction grating on right in front of the lens. Now the camera is just a camera, ordinary Rebel XT, 8 megapixel camera, and it has a normal lens. And the trick is, the lens actually focuses on the slit, and you get that. Now, that is a very detailed spectrum of the uplight. It's not sky glow, it's uplight. This is the reflection of the sky. There's nothing coming from above, everything is coming from below. So, okay, you have an idea of how I get it. Now, how do I know the elements? The radiating elements, the lines, how do I know? Well, you have to do a spectrum analysis. So, about, I don't know, 25 years ago, I built that device to accommodate a film camera. Remember film? So that cable release and everything, you need long exposures. And on the right is the same box, with that digital camera and just a knockoff timer, just an eBay timer, cheap timer. It'll work. Okay. Okay, so this is a 21-year-old spectral image of my clear night sky. And it's something you don't typically see. Why? Because it's pretty much classic Rayleigh scattering, which is 1 over the wavelength to the power of 4. So you got the blue wavelength scattering and violet, scattering much more than the red wavelengths. So you barely see sodium lines in a clear night sky. This is my backyard with a lot of light pollution. And my backyard is just about, it's the suburbs of Montreal, a little bit north and west, on the island. So what you see is a very busy blue area. And all the lines are determinable, meaning you know what the lines are as long as you can identify what is the element causing the lines. So I have some of them marked there. I have a lot of images, so I'm going to go through them very quickly. Okay, everybody knows HG, Na. What is SC on the bottom? Does anybody know what SC stands for? It's an element.
Silicon?
Scandium. Scandium is what? It's in all the metal halide lamps. The metal halide lamps are also made with mercury and sodium. So essentially what you're seeing here is a spectrum, the blue part of the spectrum. I used hypered film back in the days. So the blue response was very, very high. So scandium is a very busy spectrum. When you see scandium, it's busy. And 2 of the major lines are in the blue-green window that we utilize to see the nebulas. So this is the huge difference between a clear night and an overcast sky. The overcast sky is just uplight. This is what's going up. And again, this is film back in 2001. One of my last good spectral images with film. The same film, Fujicolor 800. It was a fantastic film because it had an amazing amount of violet sensitivity. Okay, so what you have on top is classic Rayleigh scattering. On the bottom you have scattering independent of wavelength. There's no preference. So it's basically uplight. And you have marked on the top and bottom the nanometers. So if you want angstroms, you just add 10 or multiply it by 10. Okay, now the difference between film and digital camera is not that you get different response or the weights of the spectral lines reported in sky glow are different. It's just that the time necessary to expose the image is much shorter. On top you have, is this overcast sky? Is this an overcast? So again, this is uplight. You have about half an hour exposure. And on the bottom is 3 minutes. This is the camera, it's 3 minutes, that's it. So I always thought, and I kind of like was pushing myself to get this into a bit of work and put an organized little book or something. I wondered why nobody ever did this before. Because it's very easy. So you go through a couple of different camera bodies. They're pretty much the same, except the fourth one, which is a naked CMOS body, meaning I opened it up, removed the filter that's on top of it, the hot mirror filter, and put it back together again. And you have a little bit extra sensitivity in the violet, as well as H alpha on the other end. These are clear night spectra, except the last one. It's an overcast. So as you see through, I guess it's pretty much almost the same year, 2011, except the last one. They're all pretty much even and the same spectral images and the weights. Okay, so this is how we know where the lines come from. You do a spectral analysis, basically. You take a photograph of a lamp. The top part is my sky globe, I believe 2008. At the bottom is a spectral image of a sodium lamp. Now I chose a sodium lamp that is rich in mercury, Hg. So, okay, we got the lines for sodium. They're marked with a heavy hour on the bottom. Okay, that's good for sodium, but a lot happening in the blue. So we're comparing a mercury lamp, a DX-coated mercury lamp from way back, from the 1964 era to 1980. So we got the mercury lines, yeah, but the DX phosphor coating for the red lines, they're missing essentially in my sky globe. So this is again the 2008 sky globe. So you photograph a metal halide lamp and you get all the scandium lines. And the arrows indicate only scandium. And I forgot to mark the red ones too. So it's a very rich spectrum. And naturally, when it's used the way it's used, in a polluting manner, it's going to show in the sky globe. So this is again a clear sky. The spectrum shows basically quite a bit of scandium lines. And there is a fill in the self-absorbed area for the sodium. This is this area here. We can explain now why it's filled in. Because metal halide has more or less a peak in there. Oh, we can go further by, now this time to accentuate the red, I took the spectrum, the sky globe spectrum, uplight spectrum, compared it with an induction lamp, a fluorescent induction lamp. Now this is the coating basically, the triphosphor coating is 3 phosphors. It's a 3rd generation lamp. They're trying to improve the efficacy, meaning the watts, the lumens per watt. So it turns out that this coating is very highly efficacious, meaning it's very efficient to operate it. But it's not as efficient as sodium. Anyways, so you see here, one of the phosphors is actually a peak. And the peak is at 611 nanometers. So when you see it in your uplight or in your sky globe, you know you have this lamp contaminating your sky. Now you can actually compare the two lines. The sodium line, the 616 nanometer, compared to the 611, and you can gauge kind of the how much lighting they're using, the city or the town is using. So that's the spectral analysis. And now I'm just going to show very quickly. This doesn't work. Okay, that's right. So this is the induction fluorescent lamp. This is just a compact fluorescent coating. They're the same. The compact fluorescent lamps all have this coating, so that the mercury lines are there, the mercury dose, plus there's the phosphor. Okay, now LED is a different beast. LED, of course, is a indium gallium nitride, and it's essentially an Indian peak, an Indian element. Okay, it's 450 more or less. Depends how the lamp is driven. It gets shifted a bit, or widened or broadened. And sometimes, rarely, as you'll see, there is also a peak at 410. Now, the dashed line that I have here, number 1, is the sensitivity of our circadian cells, the cells that we use to adjust your biological rhythms. This is not visual. It's a circadian sensing. It senses blue light, the back of the eyes, and this is kind of like recent, after the millennium, they discovered, 2007, I believe, that the peak of sensitivity for those cells, the melanopsin cells, their sensitivity is in the blue, 470, pretty much. So I tried to make an accurate diagram to show where the peaks fall. So LED problem is that the peak is within the crest of the circadian cells. Now, number 2 is photopic vision. That is our rods in darkness. And number 3 is photopic vision, our cones. So you see the phosphor that is included in pretty much all LED lighting has a nice sensitivity, peak, I guess, in the middle of the sensitivity of our photopic vision cones. The big problem is this. A lot of people think that it's a great danger to have dusk to dawn lighting in our streets because it's a big experiment. I'm not sure what's going to happen. This is linked to breast cancer for women because circadian cells, when they see blue light, they interrupt melatonin production. Melatonin is a hormone, is a known what is it called? I guess pardon me? Anti-inflammatory, free radical scavenger. So I don't know what the results will be with all the LED being implemented, but I'm just going to go to the next one. So through the years, the spectral images that I've been able to get, this is overcast, shows both the LED band showing up very quickly within a year. The LED band's right there, 450 and less a day in this area. And the 611 peak. Oh, it was there in 2008, but barely visible. So, now clear sky shows the LED band even more, and this sits right here. Now, this is again my backyard. Now, LED is always a full cutoff, sharp cutoff. Everything is directional down to the street. So what's going on here? Why is it showing up in my sky? The levels are just too high. So very quickly, and we only have in Montreal, much less than Ottawa, about 20% of street lights are LED. Downtown is a bit more than peripheral areas. Now, the huge difference between clear night above and the overcast sky on the bottom means that the overcast exposure is only a tenth of the clear night exposure. So, because the overcast exposure is so easy to get, I went around towns, and I wanted to go basically towns that had LED to see what is going on. I just wanted to see what the sky will be like. So I'm using an overcast spectrum of uplight of different cities. From now on, you'll see different cities in this region. Okay. Next. Do I have to point at someone? There you go. The where? This?
Up here.
Okay. You go downtown Montreal where the Mount Royal is, you look at the uplight. You must have seen the first picture that I put with the hotspot. That's right where I am. So the LED band is this. And the other bands are basically from sodium. Lots of sodium. That's a peak from sodium. That's a mercury line. That's sodium. That is sodium too. That's mercury. But this here, and this is scandium. Okay, now you see here the 611 peak. So there's trifluorescent induction lighting somewhere that I can't see now. Over here, 670.8 is a lithium line. Lithium. Why lithium? Well, the lighting industry that they are, basically they're opportunistic. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Opportunistic. They discovered that in the arc tube, the quartz tube, if there is a contamination by lithium, basically in the structure, you get a radiation of lithium because it gets excited and it radiates. Now they're actually doping quartz tubes to get that line. 671 is very close to the silicon line for astro imagers. 672, I think, silicon 2. And H alpha is right about here. Next. Okay. This is at the outskirts of Montreal. This is pretty much at the edge of the island. This is where Montreal's RASC Center has an observatory. We're just close by. So you see, it's essentially the downtown area. They have LED, a lot of LED, not a lot of in the outskirts. It's basically a sodium and metal halide mix. That gets worse. Here's Toronto. Now, I've never seen anything so defined here for the LED.
Wow.
And also you see the 405 here, and I have a question mark. This is 410. So it's really indium in the LED spectrum. Okay, you might say we also have a little bit of a continuum here. This is right next to the CN Tower. But you move away from the CN Tower, you move about a couple of kilometers in town. It's gone. It's sort of back to normal. I think it's mostly sodium because Toronto is still sodium. Sodium streetlights, orange. Most of it. Well, this is somewhere in the Danforth area. It's 3 or 4 kilometers north of the downtown area. In the outskirts, however, the towns are LED. But you say LED, well, why the mercury lines? Okay, there's the remnants of sodium. By the way, all of this is overcast sky. Overcast. Remember, it's easier to do, so that's why I'm getting the overcast. I just need about 5 minutes. If I don't do it, I can do it again. If I don't get it right, I'll do it again, or maybe a couple. Anyways, notice what is dominating here. This area, right? So this is overcast. This is independent of wavelength, meaning it's just basically scattering whatever clouds are seen. So imagine what happens when you're in a clear night sky. These will be predominant in your night sky. Anyways, the light pollution is actually lighter in these towns. So I'm not able to really gauge the amount of light pollution. I'm just gauging the spectral output, or I should say the composition of the skyglow. So we're getting closer here. This is Renfrew. It's about an hour from west. And it's basically sodium. We have a very nice band here that shows sodium. This is, by the way, the spectrum of sodium to have a comparison. But you do see a few scanning lines. The major lines are there. 508 and 474. And I'm just going to point out, 500 nanometers is right there. And H beta is right here. 486, I think. And as you can see, there's just a little induction lighting from the 611P. But just go 2 kilometers right on the Trans-Canada Highway on Route 17, I think. It's just all metal halide. This is almost the spectrum of metal halide, because if you look at the sodium reversal band here, it's classically a metal halide driven area. And also, you've got lines here that are visible that are typically not visible, with just a little scandium. Next, very good. Okay, VARS. You know where VARS is?
Yeah.
Just a little east of here. Oh, not even an hour. It's half an hour. Okay, the town is north of the 417, but right on the 417 is sort of an industrial area. And it's basically a little bit like aged metal halide. And that kind of makes sense because that, what is that, auction house there? It's got some old lamps there. Aged metal halide means that these lines, scandium lines, are reduced. And the mercury lines remain. But you have some LED. Okay, not a lot of induction lighting. The 611 peak is not there. Again, this is overcast. So this is actually looking towards Ottawa. I'm at Canada Summer Park, looking towards Ottawa. Now that's the overcast of Ottawa. Look at how bright the LED band is. Now, how do you get there? Essentially, I think it's because the light levels are so high on the ground, the reflections are readily spreading light upwards. Now, it's basically a sodium, but this is a few months ago. I believe this was October of 2016. So one would imagine that sodium would be getting lower and lower, and LED would be getting up higher and higher. But look at the amount of scandium. Actually, this peak, brighter than the 467 sodium peak, means that there's a lot of metal halide, a lot of commercial stuff. And the relative peaks of 611, 616 means there's also a lot of induction lighting. And next, Kingston. Kingston now is LED. All the streets are LED. Well, that doesn't look like LED, does it? It's pretty much a mix of metal halide, LED, but also induction lighting. And that's why the mercury lines are so bright. Now notice the sodium area is not like the classic HPS sodium-driven self-reversal. It's filled in. There's very little sodium left, but there is a little sodium left because you can still barely see the 498 line and the 467. So what you have here is a white spectrum. Basically, they love Kingston. I don't know if you're from Kingston. They love LED, metal halide, and induction lighting. So they're trying to dispose of sodium. Okay, now, I thought it was very high, the metal halide component, so I went on the east side. This is from the west side, from like the Odessa rest stop on Highway 417. And I went on the other side just a month or so ago, and I confirmed that it's a lot of metal halide. And it's a similar spectrum, but a lighter spectrum because summer canopy cuts down a lot on the uplight. And also the greening of the grasses actually absorbs a lot of light falling onto it. But I have confirmed that there's a lot of metal halide in the uplight of Kingston. Now, this is a little bit better. This is just a half an hour west of here. Our fryer is LED. And it shows, basically, you have the continuum here that is showing up, okay, the LED band, but there's some induction lighting, but not a lot of metal halide. This was a little windy, so that's why it's fuzzy, the sharpness of the lines. But I like this. This is good. And in fact, I remember looking at the overcast, I said, this is nice, this is light. This is meaning not intense light. So I can live with that because I can put a filter and just basically do the work that I need to do and filter out this area and let this area pass through the filters. So we're sort of going back to the Mercury era back like the 1960s. This is Brockville. Brockville is actually not an LED town. It's induction lighting. Actually, I was quite surprised to see induction lighting. I'm going to go back to it, but this is what it looks like. It's one of the main streets in Brockville. Okay, now, to me, this is a little bit contrasty. I think about 15 years ago or 20 years ago, this sort of pattern on the street would have been unheard of because the pattern is so contrasting, it's not even. The lighting industry has changed completely to allow induction lighting. Glare is almost nil because the street lights are actually fluorescent tubes, a torus, and they're long tubes. So I'm just going to go back here. It's essentially what you have is a continuum and the mercury lines, but you have some sort. Okay. And you see the 611 peak is brighter than the 616 peak of the sodium. Okay, so I think that's about it. So what is happening? Everybody's converting to LED, which means that supposedly we're going to have a bluer spectrum in the night sky. I'm just going to go back once. If you do a calculation, right, for a 450 peak here for LED, if you do a calculation 1 over the wavelength to the 4th power compared to the sodium of the past. Let's take this as the peak of the sodium of the past. Now the difference is 569 and 450. You calculate the Rayleigh scattering in clear night skies. LED is 2.5 times more scatterable for good, clear night sky conditions. So which means that the levels on the street have to be 2.5 times lower, or the total uplight should be 2.5 times lower to have the same light pollution. So I don't know where you're from. I'd like to throw the lights up. I think I'm done. I have my contact info because I'm putting this together. It's 7 chapters, very diverse chapters of the history of light pollution. Is with all my images. So if you want to review a chapter, just give me a shot. Write it down. I need a peer review, I need comments, I need somebody to kind of like correct me. I'm doing some math, I need basically some input from members. I'll take anybody's input. Okay, so I think I'm done. I don't have any more. Can you throw the lights? We're done. Thank you. Now, I want to ask a couple of questions here. So, I don't know where you come from or you live. I live in Montreal. We still have sodium lighting. and we're slowly converting to LED, and I could see that it's just as bad as before. Is that your opinion, or am I isolated here in Montreal? It's getting worse? That's sad. But as you can see with Arnfire and even Brockville, there could be benefits, meaning that for astronomers that know how to use filters, the window in the blue-green, and also the H-alpha window. Actually, the H-alpha window is pretty isolated even with sodium, because the scattering is just not there in a clear sky. It's 1 over the wavelength to the 4th power. So scattering in the orange is not that intense. Scattering in the blue is the problem. So that's about it. I don't have anything else to say, except if you have any questions.
Yes. Have you done a comparison between summer and winter? Because
Yeah.
obviously with the
Yes, I have.
snow down, you're going to have a lot more reflection on the cloud again.
Yep, I have. The
Okay.
only problem is you really can't do a measurement for light pollution, the amount of light pollution with a camera. Why? Because the temperature is always not constant. The chip heats up and records whatever it wants to record. So what you actually have to have is a light meter. However, recording spectral images with snow, I have found and calculated approximately that on average in winter when there's snow on the ground, it's about 5 to 10 times greater light pollution, or I should say greater uplight. When there's fresh snow on the ground, the reflectivity of the ground becomes like 90%. In other words, 90% of whatever is going down is going up. 90% of it. And I have found something like there's an increase of 20 to 30-fold in winter.
So the circadian rhythm, we have a peak there showing, so that's going to be slow. In the winter time, it's going to be.
Yeah. Actually,
it's an absolute mess.
in my thesis, I have reported that winter uplight is going to be far worse than before in sodium because of the type of lights that are used in some places, half pipes that are thrown down right at the sidewalk or the green grass. Is in winter it's snow. So I noticed right away that it's much higher in the winter when there's snow on the ground than the former Soviet lighting. Now, I'm just going to try to go back to Montreal. Now, this spectrum is essentially a mix of 4 lamp types. Sodium, metal halide, induction fluorescent, and LED. Now, out of the 4, the LED is known that it's a good light that is not wasteful. Everything is down, not up. There's no uplight at all. But what do we see? Why do we see the band here, as well as the continuum? Because the light levels that are used are greater than before. I've actually measured the before, sodium, and after. Now, this might be for the first few years, like maybe 2 years, 1 or 2 years actually, when burn-in and depreciation comes into play, because all lighting decreases because of burning in and dulling and dirtying and all that. So I think right away, initially, for the first 2 years, it's going to really be bright. So I don't know where Ottawa stands. I think they announced the program for retrofitting all the sodium lights to LED. I think that was about 2 years ago. I don't know exactly how far they've gone. Are they done? I don't think they're done. But
We've done that in Franklin Hill, where I live. It's all done to LED. Oxbury, which is about 10,000. It's almost complete
Okay. Yeah, I must say that driving through these areas, that there is improvement. I could see improvement because the sodium lighting in overcast sky was such a bad reflection, I guess. It's just horrendous, but I could see a little bit of a decrease. Cornwall is another one, which I'm planning to try and get. Brockville actually was a horrendous town of what, 25,000 I think, I'm not sure. It was really bright with sodium. So I'm not sure exactly how you can kind of like take whatever you need. I know in a clear sky, LED is worse. Why? Because it has a bigger, bluer component.
And is there an LED that's different?
Yeah,
it's usually-
color temperature.
Yeah, so there's some that are way better than others.
Yeah.
And they're obviously taking the cheaper way out because
Yes.
the more expensive ones are better, they're more efficient.
Okay, what is happening is that there's outcry by a lot of experts that the LED they're implementing is simply just too blue. And actually the mayor of Montreal, Denis Coderre, said that they're going to be choosing 3000 Kelvin LEDs. So the peak is actually the blue 450 is reduced, but it's not gone. It's there. So the relative peak at this area would be higher. Okay, so which means that it's closer to sodium, but sodium is a lot of red. Now I can tell you that I have a country place. You know where Denby is?
Yes.
Very dark place. It got darker just by the end of 2015, and I noticed it with my light meter. And also I could see M33 much more easily. Usually I have to struggle with averted vision, and the sky is good there, 6.0 magnitude limit. But I did notice a decrease in the sky brightness, and I could see M33 a little bit easier. Now I'm trying to figure out why, and I think it's because sodium lighting, which is basically a peak here at 569, and the red, orange continuum, the bulk of the light is there. So it doesn't scatter out in a clear night sky. It actually penetrates deeper into the atmosphere. So when sodium disappears from our cities, it's not going to be completely disappear. They're not going to vanish completely. They're going to linger a bit. They might come back because it's very efficient lighting. After we're gone, maybe they're going to come back with LED, with sodium lighting again, with electronic ballasts and full cutoff heads. So this way the lighting industry can make more money and say, oh, this is better for photopic vision, centrally fixated photopic, not peripheral vision, where LED, bluer LED I should say, is better. So I have a lot of mixed feelings about the lighting industry, because the lighting industry is the one that's basically don't care what happens, really. Only because of the IBA, the lighting industry has changed everything. But the light levels are higher sometimes now. I just want to say again that when this disappears, sodium area disappears, the country sky will get darker, because there is basically not a lot of reddish, orangey light that will penetrate into the atmosphere. It will be scattered out near the cities. At least that's what I think.
I think when it comes to the lighting of Denby,
Yep.
originally lighting in Denby was essentially there was almost no shielding.
Yeah.
Whereas when they put the LED lights in, at least there's some shielding, and that reduces the.
I've been through Denby and I've recorded exactly what they did, what they installed. I remember the plastic Cobra heads that they had, the sodium lights, the typical 5% spill, whatever. And I've noticed that they put 51 watts at the minor streets or side streets, and through the highway and the main street, this is Ridge Street, the 101, Cree 101, I could tell exactly what hit. But I did notice that the spill is not there as it was. It's darker. Now it's just a minor town, very close to my area, my cabin. But the town from Ottawa, I could still see. I should say the sky glow from Ottawa, I could still see. And I can still see the sky glow from Toronto. And then we're talking about slightly over 200 kilometers away. But it did get a little bit darker at my cabin. So hopefully the cities will get darker, but there's no chance in that, I think. Not for the first couple of years. Okay. Thank you.
A little bit later on, if it's overcast, I'm going to take the overcast spectrum of downtown Ottawa. Very simply with this device.
All right, thank you very much. So we're going to jump right into obs. We're running a little bit late, so we're going to go right into observations. I believe first is Andre.
Hello, I'm Andre Paquette, and I live in Georgian Park, Ontario. So I have to deal with that sky glow for a bit. I think the first image here, and you all know it's been a terrible year, rainy, very, very rainy year, so I haven't got much imaging in, but the three images that I'm about to show you are all from this year, so I have been able to do a little bit. So here's M51. This is, I think it was 12 hours and 40 minutes of total exposure. It's kind of too bad we can't actually blow it up and look at the little pieces of it, because it's actually very high resolution and there's all these little galaxies kind of hidden around it. The extra exposure in this really allowed me to kind of bring out the galaxy and bring out the background without it getting too grainy. That was taken in April of this year. Sorry, this is Celestron Edge HD14, and the camera's an Apogee 16 and I'm doing it all at 11. The field of view is about the size of a full room. And here's M13, some kind of idea. We were talking about this on one of the groups, the Apple groups, and the little galaxy that you see there at the top left is not 6207, it's IC46. Someone's going to have to remind me when I check my notes. Thank you, 4617. So IC62, so NGC 6207 is 11 point mag 11.6. That guy, IC4617, is mag 15.2. And we'll zoom in again. Oh, actually, I don't know if I'm going to zoom in again, but there's if you blow it up to 100%, you can see that there's actually a little galaxy just up and to the left of that, between the galaxy and the star, that shows up fairly well. And that guy is a mag 19 galaxy that I was only able to find in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. And I think there's a slide that comes up with this info. Hello. I just wanted to show this because I thought it was funny. X marks the spot. One of my frames had two satellites going through. Thank you. I don't know how to run this thing. Oh, I went back. Oh, now what back. Oh, there we go. So there's the blow up of IC4617, and it's a little hard to see here, but there's a little smudge between IC4617 and the star there. And oh, that's bright. Sorry, that's the little smudge, and there's the info on it from Sloan Digital Sky Survey. Was not able to find that little guy in the PGC catalog. This was done more recently. The M13 was done at the beginning of July. This was done at the end of July. So here's a big field view of the Ring Nebula. And yeah, they should have altered the gamma a bit. So there's a blow up of the middle. I have forgotten the number of that galaxy, but someone here will know it. Thank you. And again in this, there's all sorts of little dusty little galaxies in the background that are kind of cool to look at. And that's about it.
Hey, Ruby?
Okay, we really don't see the people correctly. So, can we turn off the light? I can see my nose. Okay. Hi, I'm Ruby, and I've been a member of the RASC for about a year. And today I'm going to present my moon sketching. But first, I'm going to tell you why I'm presenting this. So about a month ago, we had the GA, and while reading the schedule, one of them interested me. It was the moon sketching from Brian. So I got there and helped him and to organize his stuff. And while he was presenting, I just wanted to go outside and draw a moon that wasn't there. So at the end of his presentation, he was giving to his helper a book and a crayon. And it was like he was telling me, go draw the moon, young girl. So about 2 days after this, my mom and I and my new book went outside for about 45 minutes to take it over. Me and my mom and my book went outside with the telescope. So after 45 minutes of mosquito and two persons trying to fight over the telescope, because my mom wanted to see Jupiter, but I wanted to look at the moon so I could draw, you know. So this was, I don't know if I'm going to say it correctly, but the waxing Jibu view from my top sonnet 8-inch reflector with a 20mm eyepiece. Right now I'm working on the Explore the Universe certificate, and that night I drew this, we were looking at the Tycho crater, I think it's this one, the Mares Tranquilitates, but I think it's this one. And I think it looked like a seashell, so I drew it like a seashell. And the Mares Tranquilitates, I think it's this one, kind of. I can't quite figure it out, so yeah. This one? Thank you. So that's it. And oh yeah, I really like the paper. What it did, I think it kind of created some details I didn't put in it, but we can really see on the paper right there. We can really like tell the details I didn't put, but yeah. So that's it.
Well, it's dark. I can't see any of it, so I'll make it all up. This is the veil. It's a mosaic of 6 panels, about 270 individual frames, about 18 hours involved in this. The veil is about 3 degrees across, and so this image therefore is about 4 degrees across, which is a big swath of sky. The veil, if you notice, it's sort of like, it's red and teal in color. The teal is oxygen 3, and the red is hydrogen alpha light. Now, when you look at it, it's a supernova that blew up about 8,000 years ago, and it's about 2,100 light years away, and it's about 100 light years across. So it's fairly large, and when you look at it, if it blew up, why is it not like a bubble? It should be a bubble, right? But the thing is, it's really thin bubble, and you can only see the edges of it where there's some thickness to the edge. And it's about, if you take the radius of it, the thickness of the shell that's been blown off by the supernova is only about 1/50,000th as big as the radius. So it's pretty thin. You only see it if you're looking through a whole bunch of it on the edges, like you see there. Now, when you look at this through a telescope, by the way, it's found in Cygnus, the Swan or the Northern Cross, and it's under one of the arms, near Deneb. It's pretty high in the sky right now, so you can see it pretty easily if it gets clear and the moon goes down. They never seem to be together anymore. Now, if you're going to look at it, we don't see hydrogen alpha light very well, which is, the red, but in the dark. But we do see the oxygen 3 with the green. We see that pretty easily. And so using an oxygen 3 filter with a sort of a medium-sized scope, say 8 inches or bigger, it's pretty easy to see this in the sky. And I suggest that you look at it. Now, I'm afraid to push any buttons here. I'm not going to. See the star on the right-hand side? That's Cygnus 52. Means it's about the 52nd brightest star in Cygnus. But it's actually a monster star. It's not in the nebula at all. It's 10 times closer to us, about a little more than 100 light years away. It's 17 times bigger than our sun, and it's about 120 times as bright. I'm assuming that means that it's a big star. It'll probably go supernova sometime too. Anyway, the picture was a lot of fun. It was about, as I don't say, about 17 hours to one time. Okay.
All right, so as usual, I'm going to zoom through my closing remarks. We do still have some star parties going. The next one is August 18th at the Carp Library parking lot right next to Deacon Bunker. This is so much stuff. Okay, so right next to Deacon Bunker, the directions are right here. It's out in Carp. And our next members only star party at FLO is August 19th, so the following Saturday. So just a quick reminder, just one observing now, of our public outreach event on August 21st during the solar eclipse. It starts at 12 p.m., ends around 4, and it's right here at the museum. And of course, observing is weather permitting, but the indoor talk by Dr. Jesse Rogerson is rain or shine. And Jesse is a new kind of, he's an astronomer, and he's like the reference guy for the museum. So you're going to be seeing a lot of him. Oh. Okay, so the GA photos are up on Stephen Nurse's website. So snurse.ca, and then you have to sign in. So username RASC, password GA2017. I believe we're going to send out an email with those details, but you get all the pictures from the whole weekend. There are plenty. It's really cool. So Estelle's pick of the month: Dark Matter and the Dinosaurs: The Astounding Interconnectedness of the Universe, written by Lisa Randall. And so in this book, the author suggests that the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs was knocked out of its orbit as the solar system was passing through a disk of dark matter. And so in this book, she tries to explain that and defend that point of view, but she also makes lots and lots of links between our life here on Earth and the functioning of the universe around it. So she makes lots of links between dark matter and our life and basically everything in between. So if that doesn't make you want to read, I don't know what will. Membership, as usual, regular membership, family, youth membership. Membership benefits, you get access to the Ted Bean Loan Library, the Stan Mod Book Library, access to the grounds of the Fred Lawson Observatory. With training, you get access to the observatory. You get these publications, Sky News, the RASC Journal, the Observer's Handbook, and Astronauts every month. Club information. Our meetings are usually webcast on Ustream, not today, not in the past couple of months, I think, but we'll get back on that track pretty soon. RASC Ottawa Live. So thank you very much. Audience 75, a bit on the lower side, but it's August. And as usual, we are meeting at Grace O'Malley's. You go right down our Aviation Parkway, turn right on Ogilvy, you can't miss it. So yeah, so next meeting, the same as usual, 7:30 p.m., September 8th, once again the second Friday to let you have your long weekend. And so yeah, thank you very much for coming. I'm going to pull the door prizes in a minute, but thank you very much for being with us, and I hope to see you here.